Okay, I think the question was what or how did I approach for the binary model, right? So let me share my screen. You're able to see my screen, right?
Yes, yes, I'm here.
Good. All right. Let's see. All right, so the problem statement was we are having a code. As I told you, we were technically duplicating the code, right? So it was code, so on and so forth, right? For every single client, we are duplicating the code. So the proposal to me that came was, hey, Samir, we are putting a frog. We are putting the binary, right? And by now, you know what binary is. Binary has a .class file. And that binary model probably comes, the name comes from here. And I keep telling it, it's a very misleading name. It shouldn't be called a binary model. It should be called a source model or assembly model, right? Or a dependency model, but not a binary model. But just to give you a historical record as to how the requirement came to me. The requirement came to me as, okay, we put binaries into JFrog, which is basically jars, wars, EARs, right? Now, for each one of these, do not keep the code over here. Download this jar, put the .class file in the target/classes. If you've looked at target folder, there's a classes folder from where the compiled classes are kept. And from those classes file is where the package is created. So you compile the code, put it up into the classes folder, target classes folder. You take everything from the target classes folder and create the final package. That is how the life cycle of Maven is at a high level, right? So the direction was pick up the .class file, directly inject it over here, and whatever extra class source file that you'll have it in your src main Java. And finally, what you have is your one class, which we talked about yesterday, good morning Java, is over here. Everything else, the hello Java, hello.class, you bring it up from the jar and put it up over here. And this is how it was being done, right? My first question was, this doesn't sound like a great solution to me. The whole reason is when you're putting something in the class file and packaging it, you have an inherent problem that you are delivering package that has classes which are not what? Which are not what? Anybody knows? You are delivering package that has classes which are not
verified,
compiled. Right? You're compiling what is there in your source, but you're not compiling what is here, because I told you the compile stage is happening over here. Your one source file has been compiled, put into classes, and you're bringing the other ones and putting over here. Now, when you're doing that, the only place that your code could break is at runtime. Even if you don't understand Java, this should be pretty simple for you to understand. Is if you're packaging something, for example, I have a jar, right? Inside the jar, I can put Samir.class. And anything stops me from that? Like you can open up in 7-zip and you can add a new class there, right? You can add a Rumana.class or Jyoti.class or whatever, right? In it, nobody stops you from doing that. What happens when you deploy it and somebody tries to call Samir.class, or even if somebody doesn't call Samir.class is lying there for no reason. If somebody is inheriting from Samir.class, there might be some object which are required by Samir.class, which we have not brought in. So there can be several problems when you do not compile it. Compilation is what tells you, yes, the code looks good. It is ready for delivery to production. That's what compilation is, right? You compile the whole code as a single entity. There might be 100 classes, 1,000 classes, whatever it is. So my proposal to that was, we should not package anything which is not compiled. So we will follow the same pattern what you said, but while publishing to JFrog, we will publish also the source. Now the question comes, how did I know that you can publish source to JFrog? Did one of you knew about that? And if you knew, tell me how you knew about it. Did Mansa or Jyoti know that you can publish source to JFrog? When I say source, I'm talking about source.jar, right? Did any one of you know about it?
No.
Okay, how did I know, right? That's the first question you should be asking, since I'm telling you how did I approach for the solution. I knew it because I've been using Java for quite some time. I know all the Apache libraries has source. I'm coming from a world wherein I would hook up this source into my IDE. Earlier days, it used to be Eclipse. Nowadays, it's IntelliJ, JetBrains, right? I know that I can hook up the source so that when I want to look at the source of my framework, which I'm using from third party, I will be able to read the Java code. This is the place where I learned a lot. This is another tips for anybody who's coding, that it always helps to look at somebody else's code. Okay, so I always knew there's a possibility of generating source. So since I always knew there's a possibility of generate source, my first question was Google, right? Can you tell me if Maven allows me to generate source? And Google says yes. So I found my first, which plugin?
Source plugin.
Maven source plugin.
Samir,
Yeah.
sorry to interrupt you. JFrog is new to me, but you remember when we were covering JFrog topic, where we would push the artifactory to JFrog, right? I had a question. Is there a way that we can get to know what is the source code for this artifact?
Mm-hmm.
You remember that question I had?
Do you have an answer? And I said,
yeah.
Do you have an answer for that?
Now I can relate.
Okay, so by this source, you're saying you'll be able to relate which source it is?
Yeah, with the solution, we have the source related to the artifactory, right?
It is. And let me tell you one more thing, okay? Putting the source in artifactory is anti-pattern. It's not a pattern, but we had to solve a solution, right? The whole reason you would say, why is it anti-pattern? The anti-pattern is the source of truth. Source of truth is where it originates and where it eventually dies. Is supposed to be GitHub, GitLab, Bitbucket. You're not supposed to replicate that source across multiple places. But in our case, we were not replicating the source, we were replicating the versioned source. So the most important piece for us to remember that is, we wanted to know that it is 1.0.0. Yes, we could always go into GitHub. If you remember, I told you, by knowing which tag, and we could have always pulled up from there, not from JFrog, right? So that way we would have one place where the source of truth would be. But since we were already using Nexus, which is a family of JFrog, basically, they belong into the same bucket, although they are two separate companies. Nexus is by Sonatype. But I'm talking about JFrog because I have told you about JFrog, right? But for your point, you have a sources jar over here, but there is no way for you to tell from where this source is originated. I think your original question, Romana, was, yes, where did this source originate? So by looking at this, even if you expand this jar, if you look at the Java class files, it will not tell you I came from this location in GitHub or Bitbucket or GitLab.
Yeah, but
so there's no traceability.
But you talked about, as a solution, you talked about adding some manifest to the article. Yeah.
Yes. So you can add a manifest. And I think I showed you the Maven jar plugin, right? Where you could add manifest. We have done that in the EPOM. So in that manifest, you can specify where your location of your source is. But doing that also is anti-pattern in my mind, because somebody could move this source into a different place. So now whatever you created is become stale.
There can't be a dynamic linking.
No, when you say dynamic linking, what do you mean? You created a jar, you put a file inside it, and you put the path in it, right? There is no way you can change the path. You cannot tell this path has to go to database and pick it up from there. If you're talking about that dynamic linking.
Yeah, somewhat like that, yes.
Yeah. So if you have a jar, you downloaded the jar on your machine, there is no way it can go and look from somewhere else. I think nobody will want to do it that way, Rumana. The reason is, if there is a strong desire to do it, yes, we can do it. So there's nothing impossible. But the thing is, do you really want traceability on where the code originated? Because today the code belongs in my company, X. The company got acquired by Y. Now you don't want to go and change at several places. It's overhead. Okay. Let's continue.
Yep.
So the first piece of the puzzle is done. We understood that there's a Maven source plugin. And what was the next piece of source? The next piece of problem was, I want to publish this in JFrog. It is sitting in JFrog now. The first piece, right? The second piece was, when I want to use that source into my new implementation, how do I download this and pick up only the files that I want? I had already used Maven dependency plugin. So I knew dependency plugin is all about downloading a dependency, copying the dependencies of these dependencies. So that was a problem that I had worked on. So if given one dependency X, I want to know all the dependencies X1, X2, X3 that it will bring in transitively as a tree, and it could just go on forever. I wanted to know all of the dependencies. So this problem I had already solved using the Maven dependency plugin. So I knew dependency plugin gives me an option to download dependencies. So I started reading it. And when I started reading it, I got that particular goal from Maven dependency plugin, which will let me download the source and have an includes and excludes on it. So the second problem was solved using Maven dependency plugin. Now, yeah, any question?
No, I was just reiterating as to what to bring in and what to exclude, right?
Yes, yes. So we started with bringing everything actually. And then came the requirement, oh, we want to just include certain things. And then I looked at the configuration and figured out. So I went and I started reading the documentation and also the source code. If the documentation doesn't tell you everything, you have to look at the source code. You already know how to write a Maven plugin. So you are able to read the mojo. Right? You can read the mojo and you can figure out what are the different configurations that are available, even if the documentation doesn't specify. But I was lucky in this case, the documentations were clear. It was telling what to include, what not to, what to exclude, basically. Right? Once that is done, the third problem that I had was, okay, we brought in, but you remember that source thing which I showed you, that it does not get added to source automatically. It puts it in generated sources, but it doesn't package it. Then the question was how to add a source which does not belong in SRC main Java. How to do that? So I said, okay, there's a build helper Maven plugin. That's where build helper Maven plugin was discovered. Okay, so that allowed us to add a source into SRC or add source basically. And that basically wraps up the whole solution for a problem. So that solution didn't come in a day. We had to hoop through multiple things to get to a solution. For example, yesterday you saw I wanted to run an executable jar and it was not letting me run it. So my next jump was to create a Uber jar. And to create a Uber jar, what did I use? Maven Shade plugin, right? Or Shade plugin.
Shade.
I use that. So that's how you would approach for a problem. What you learn now, it might not directly help you solve a problem, but those dots get connected, and it's very important to connect those dots. Does that describe basically what did I probably do to solve the whole problem?
Interesting, Samir.
Yeah. Do you want to see some more? Do you want to talk a little more about some other problems that I solved? Anyone?
Yeah, please tell us, Samir.
Sure. Let's talk about how we came to that HC library. Right? How did we come for that? There was a time when we were going to Jenkins and building a free. Okay, let me start with very ancestral, right? Let's go back to tradition. Before I joined my company, there was a time where there was one place they used to call it as Megatron. Okay, developers used to build on their machine. They used to upload this to Megatron, the jar files, and then it used to be delivered to clients. Before I joined in, they also did one more thing. They brought this Atlassian bamboo, which is similar to Jenkins, and they made this guy to build it, put it in Megatron, and then deliver to client. And everything was being built using Ant. Okay, this is the first version even before I joined in. So this is a no-no. You never want a developer to build it locally and then deliver it to clients, right? That's a complete no-no. At least this is better, building it in Bamboo. What's the second iteration? When I joined in, I was in India and my assignment was, we want to convert all this Ant to Maven. That was my first assignment. So I said, okay, great. Doing this was a big work, right? It's not a small work. You have to convert everything. You have to read through the Ant. You have to understand what it's doing and start converting it to Maven. This gave me an opportunity to extensively work on plugins. Because now I have to understand what Ant is doing, how to convert it to Maven. And the lucky stuff was, this was done very well. Whoever had done it really well. Okay. While converting it to Maven, what I did was Maven, when we converted it to Maven, I had to have a way to integrate it with Bamboo. That is when I got to learn Bamboo. First time in my life, I learned Bamboo and we were delivering it to the environments. And these are like our VMs, right? There was no Kubernetes, there was no OpenShift, there was nothing. And please stop me wherever I'm trying to tell you like a story more than technical stuff over here. Now, when we did it in Bamboo, the issue was Bamboo has something called as executors, right? Even the way we have it in Jenkins, and they have limited executors. Since they have limited executors, I said, oh, you know what? And we were using SVN, by the way, at that time. So the next project that came to me, I knew there's a problem here. It doesn't allow me to build concurrently for multiple. So if there's a two running, the third one has to stop, which I felt was not right. It was wasting a lot of time, right? So I already knew this. This was there in my mind. That's my brain, whatever it is. Now the next thing came up was I said, hey, you know what? We should move away from SVN to Git. And the fun thing is, when you propose a change, nobody likes it. So it was beaten down. It was beaten down for almost 2 years that we cannot go to Git. There's a lot of work to be done. Eventually, there was a pressure from somewhere high above that we have to move to Git. And we started converting. So I wrote a small engine that would help migrate from SVN to Git. So we didn't want to do it manually, right? So this was a small engine that I wrote to convert it to Git. And then we were on Git over here. And the engine was pretty, this problem itself is a big problem to talk about. And I'm going to briefly talk about it. If you want, annotate it somewhere and then ask me to talk about it again. When we talk about moving one source to another, So SVN to Git, and we want to move that code. The biggest problem is there are several developers who are working over here from SVN. And now to move it to Git, the problem is you have to tell them, stop working. I'm going to move it to Git, and then all of you go move here and start coding from here, right? So you have to ask them to stop. So for that sake, what we did was I set up this engine which will move everything to Git, keep it ready over here, and then also do a mirror. So anything that you were doing over here was automatically getting mirrored into Git. One fine day when we felt everything was right, we had jobs set up over here, everything is ready. We said, lock this down repository by repository and ask these people to move over here. When they came here, they felt as home, but that's not the end of it, right? Who's going to educate them? So to educate them, I started making docs. I started having sessions because we have to educate the bulk of it. They are the people who are going to work over here. So once the education was done, once the cutover is done, once it is all moved, these guys, and when we moved here, that is the time I introduced Jenkins for the first time. So people were able to come in here. It was a new world for them, and they started feeling, oh yeah, it's great. Yeah, initially they definitely felt it's not great, but eventually they felt it's great because now they don't have to wait for this limitation. They're able to just run fast. Okay, this is world number 2. Let's move to world number 3. So now, which world are we in? We are in GitLab, Jenkins. And then I said, while we were moving here, I said, we have to move to Nexus. And this Nexus is not what was brought in the migration. Okay, it was, I had already brought it up even in the world of SVN to move to Nexus. So now this completed the ecosystem. Instead of Megatron, brought in Nexus. Instead of Bamboo, brought in Jenkins. Instead of SVN, brought in GitLab. All right. So
Megatrain, Nexus, and JFrog, they're all similar artifact repository.
Megatron was a HTTP server. They were just serving jars out from HTTP server. Nothing more than that. It is not a product. I was Googling back then, what is Megatron, and I'm not getting anything. I reached out to my lead and I'm like, what is this Megatron? I'm not able to find anything. He started laughing. It's like Megatron is an internal name, Samir. You'll not find anything. Like how binary model is, right? Nobody will find it. So we were in this world, but were we matured? One learning that I want you to take and write it down somewhere is improvement should never stop. As I say, learning should never stop. Improvement should never stop, right? What happened after this? After this, how we were doing things becomes more important to understand what happened after this, right? The way we were doing was we were doing freestyles jobs. And by now, although we have not talked a lot about it, you know what is a freestyle job in Jenkins, right? So we started doing that. We said, oh, you know what? Freestyle job has a problem. If this Jenkins gets destroyed for whatever reason, now we have to go and create these freestyle jobs again. Why don't we move to Jenkins files so that we can keep this in GitLab and the jobs get created out from there. So that's when we started introducing Jenkins files, but we were still doing single branch, right? Jenkins files. We realized single branch Jenkins files has a lot of pain because till the time we were comparatively smaller company with comparatively smaller repository, everything was jolly happy. But now developers are asking us to create brand new repositories for releases, brand new repository for hotfix. Every time we create a branch, I have to go and create a new job in Jenkins. It's a waste of time. We said, okay, let's figure out what option do we have. We had this multi-branch jobs, which you know by now what it is. So we came up with multi-branch. We were building it on nodes directly. When I say node, it's VMs, right? We were building it like that. I said, you know what? What's the next improvement after this? The next improvement is on the node, we could have Docker and we could have jobs running within Docker. Let's go that route. So we moved to that. Okay. And that's where once we reached there, I felt there was Jenkins files. We were writing a lot of code and we came to a limitation of number of lines in Jenkins files. So our job started failing. As soon as the job started failing, I said, you know what, there's something wrong. This is not what we should be doing. We should be probably using a shared library. That's when the concept of shared library came in. And when we wrote shared library, we wrote in a very simplistic form. It is not what you see today, right? It is not this, Jyoti. It was in a very basic form. Build CONNECT, build UI, build services, build framework. We had methods like that. So one day I sat on it and I said, let me refactor this whole thing. And this project, the HC project, was done as a hobby. I built all of this. I had nowhere else to run it. I gave it away. I said, guys, take it. So technically it was not done as part of my work. It was done as part of my hobby, what you call as HC today. Okay, and that's where we are. Did improvement stop over there? If I was still there, what was the next improvement that I would have done? Do you want to know? Are you tired?
No, Samir, go ahead.
So today, you know, HC is built around this concept of metadata. And by now you should probably know somehow what metadata is. When we were building framework, when we were building services and we had the EPOM, we had to go and update the POM file in each and every project. You remember that, right? To define your upstream dependencies. Do you all remember that? We have to go and update the upstream dependencies. Now, what did I do with this shared library is every time you build a project, that project will produce a metadata, a file in GitLab or Bitbucket which will store information about, let's say, group ID, artifact ID, version number, commit hash, so on and so forth. Okay, it will capture for snapshot, it will capture for release, it will capture for beta release or whatever you call it. It will capture those details. So now when your framework builds, framework tell what is my current group ID, what is my current artifact ID, what is my current version, and so on and so forth, right? A lot of information like classifier, packaging is jar or war or ER, so on and so forth. It puts all that information. Now, when service is building, services, you are able to specify using a configuration language. So there's a file basically called config.yaml, which defines where is all this written. And similarly, this guy also has a config.yaml, which defines where is the fingerprint of this guy is supposed to be written. So it writes it into a new file. And then there's also option to tell there are some dependencies. You remember I was showing you yesterday -d x equals to y. So that x, you can define it as a dependency of upstream dependency. And you can say, there's a configuration called x in my properties. I want the value for that x to be read from this file. So that is called defining of upstream dependencies. So now when it reads it, it is able to run a Maven command and inject that value it read from here. So now multiply these two bigger projects. So you have one here, you have multiple dependencies that depend on this. You're able to define over here what is the upstream dependencies. So this metadata is the heart of it. Are you guys following what I'm trying to say, or am I just not making sense?
We're following somewhere.
You're following, right?
Yeah.
Let's move back here. Now, what I would have done, I mean, this is what is already happening today, right? Metadata is a very successful model. It is not a model used by anybody. That's fresh, baked out of my brain. Okay. Now, the question is, Today, when we are building, we are storing it into Git. I'm calling it Git because it can be GitLab, Bitbucket, whatever, GitHub. What I wanted to really do is each of these guys, when they build, they should store the metadata into some kind of a database. It should store it over here. And we should build a nice UI that will let me read from here. And you'll get information as to project A, repository A. This is the current historical record of it. I mean, current record and historical record. If you want to be able to change something, there should be a way to change it from here. You don't have to go to Git and change it. First of all, I recommend nobody to make a manual change, but there are instances where you would want to change, right? So this is where I was going for. If I wouldn't have left, this is what I would have created next. This would give them a way to do all kind of data analytics, plot charts, so on and so forth. Tell how many times the build has broken. Tell how much time a build takes. So they would never need to go to Jenkins. The whole information will be available over here because this would have been your source of truth. Not just for one project, for any projects. All of them will be here. People will be able to drill down using drop downs, which project they want. For that project, what are the different repositories which are available? For that repository, which ones have been successful? What is the release notes that you need to capture? It could be a product by itself. Didn't I give this idea before leaving? I gave. But is that created? It is not. The thing is, it's not intelligence. It is desire to do, which is important. Oh, I said some real good statement over here. Huh? Yeah, so it is the intention to do. It is not your technical capability. If you plan to do it, you'll break it up into smaller chunk and then achieve it as a big success. Is that helpful?
You're really great, Samir.
Yeah, I will stop sharing so that. Is there anything else that you want me to cover while we are still recording? No? Okay, let me stop sharing.